Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for coming out. We are so excited about tonight. This is the 1 year anniversary of Storytime with Julian. It's hard to believe, but yeah, just 1 year ago when the pandemic first hit, we did our first episode 365 days ago, and things have come so far from those humble beginnings. Take a look. Hey, Facebook fam, what's happening? So here I am, and there you are, and it is what it is. These are really trying times. There's a lot of difficult things going on, and I know a lot of us are starved for entertainment. A lot of us are starved for interaction. This is also one of those times when we tend to say things like, "Ooh, this is going to be a great time for me to finish up my reading. There's these books that I've been wanting to read," and we don't do that. So, I'm actually going to enlist your help in doing some of that and maybe hopefully provide a little bit of a service. I've been told on a few occasions that my voice can be kind of soothing. So, with that in mind, I'm going to read aloud. So, tonight at 10 p.m., if you're interested, it's going to be story time with me. And I'm going to be reading tonight from the book How Long Till Black Future Month by N.K. Jemisin. I started this book. I love this book. Then I got busy and got distracted and stopped reading this book. So I'm going to get back to it. And if you want to join me, we're going to start at page 1 and keep going till we're done. My intent is to do this for as long as I can. Look, we both know that sometimes I got an issue with follow through, so I'm not going to promise that it's going to be every night, but I'm going to do it for as often as I can. 10 p.m. starting with this. And if there's something else that you want to hear from a Black author when this is done, drop it in the comments down below and let me know. Till then, see you at 10. Peace. That was us a year ago. That was just before episode 1, and tonight we are on episode 88, and I am absolutely thrilled. Like, I can't tell y'all how thrilled I am to be hosting author, speaker, educator, and fellow Kentuckian Crystal Wilkinson. Y'all remember that we read Crystal Wilkinson's works not that long ago. We did 4 episodes actually of her works, I believe, from Blackberries, and from Water Street. And a lot of you all talked about how much you loved the vibe and the feel of it, and how it put you in the mind of Toni Morrison and put you in the mind of Zora Neale Hurston. And I remember we had a wonderful after story discussion about it, and I cannot be more happy to have her on the show tonight. So without going into a whole lot of preamble, I'm going to do one more little piece of housekeeping, and then we're going to get right to it. Tonight is the last night of the book drive. The book drive ends tomorrow. I believe we're at goal. I know books are already going out, but you can never give Black children too many Black books. So if you still want to donate, the opportunity is still there. Go ahead and hit up, take your mobile device and hit up Cash App or Venmo. It's going to be # Harriet's Bookshop or @ Harriet's Bookshop on Venmo. Just wanted to make sure that tomorrow, or I'm sorry, on Thursday's episode, we'll announce what the final tally is and let you know how many folks have already gotten their books and how many more are still going. All right. Without further ado, I am pleased to present to you all Ms. Crystal Wilkinson. Hi.
Oh, hi.
Thank you so much for coming out for our anniversary show. We are absolutely thrilled to have you. How are you this evening?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, and congratulations. 1 year. 88? Did you
88
say 88
episodes.
episodes? Wow.
88 episodes of a thing that I thought I was just going to do for like a week, 2 weeks. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. One of the great things about this program has been watching people rediscover Black lit. There are a lot of us who are sort of lapsed readers. We used to be avid readers, and then adulting got in the way, or we make up reasons and excuses for not following through with reading. And to see people develop a love for lit again has been just one of the great joys of this for me, and of course my own sort of discovery and rediscovery. And when we read your book, when we started with Blackberries, I was over the moon with just how good it felt. Like even when you're writing about bad things, it feels so good. And so many of our audience had similar reactions. They were just, they loved the characters. They loved the realness of it, the grit of it. Before we get into your newer works, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about those older works, those short stories. How much of that, I know that you are very proudly country in your own words. You call yourself country. You're very proudly representing Kentucky and Tennessee. I believe you lived in Tennessee for a little bit. Is that right?
Kentucky, and I lived in Indiana for a little bit, but
okay,
mostly Kentucky. Yeah.
How much of what we're reading is based on folk without getting yourself in too much trouble?
I don't think, well, I don't really write about the people I know, but I do try to capture the spirit of the people in the place. So I talk about all the time, like in Water Street. What I did was, there was a real Water Street in Stanford, Kentucky, and I moved all the real people out in my imagination.
Okay.
And moved my characters in, and so I was trying to capture the spirit of the place. So I think that's what I do, even back with Blackberries. I mean, I think every older woman I write has some bits and pieces of my grandmother and my great aunties and the women that I grew up with, but not dead on, not spot on. So
okay, that's dope. So like most writers, you pull little bits and pieces from people that but you ain't telling nobody's story specifically when you're talking about somebody stalking a woman as she walks into the restaurant and then
no.
Okay.
And what's so funny is like some of my stories, like I've done readings at bookstores where people come up to me and say, "I am so sorry about your sister." And I go, "But I'm an only child." And, they just keep going. "Well, you know that your sister that went to prison for killing her husband." And I'm like, fiction.
Oh, honey, no. What section did you pick the book up in? Because it wasn't biography. Now, other than being of and from Kentucky, we have a few other things in common. One of the friends of the show, Rihanna Milcar Scott, mentioned that you're going to be talking to his class pretty soon.
Yes.
And he was really excited to see that you were going to be on. Another thing that I literally did not find out until tonight, and I don't know if you still identify, are you currently an Afro-Latin poet?
I am. Yeah.
I used to be an Afro-Latin poet.
Really?
I met Frank X. Walker back in 1995 when I was at the Governor's School for the Arts. And after we completed that, he invited me to be trained up in the way of the Afro-Latin poets. And I was under that broad wing for about a year before I went off to college. And then I did my whole I'm running away from Kentucky thing because I had to find myself. And I think that's kind of antithetical to being an Afro-Latin poet. But I was so excited. What kind of work are you doing and have you been doing with the Afro-Latin poets?
Well, I was in on it from the very beginning, but I was having children and living a life in between, so I didn't make it to Louisville that much. But I was with them from the beginning, so I'm one of the founding members, and
Okay.
I've read with them. Lots of times we've read together, and they're all family. Those early years, it was great because we were all just starting writing, and we'd get in the circle and we'd hug on each other real good. But then when it came to sitting in the circle and talking about the work, it was like, oh no, this is not working on page 15 or whatever.
Oh,
So,
so after the hugging, the knives come out.
yeah, yeah. But it was great because I think all of our work improved from those early years of people being honest around that table and saying, you need to work on this part. But this is really good. So give us the love notes and
Right.
then also the help notes.
Right. Now I noticed that your upcoming book, which we'll talk about a little bit later, Perfect Black, Nikki Finney, also an Appalachian poet, wrote your foreword. Are you two
hmm
close? Have you collaborated on any pieces or anything?
We are close. When Nikki lived here before she moved back home to Carolina, we used to meet a lot when she was here, and the same thing the Appalachian poets used to do in the day. We would get together and read our work out loud. Like she's a poet, but she's working on a novel, and I'm a fiction writer, and I was always working on poetry. So sometimes we'd sit down and read each other's manuscripts, and we'd read them out loud in a coffee house somewhere, and just chit chat and get to business with the work. So
Right.
uh, yeah, I was pleased that she wrote the forward, and we've been friends for a long time.
Now, before we go into, we'll talk a little bit, like I said, about Perfect Black, but tonight we're going to be reading an excerpt from your work, The Birds of Opulence. Now, my granddaddy, Willie Long, was from a place in Kentucky called Eminence, Kentucky. Now, I know
Oh yeah.
Opulence is a fake town, but I think Eminence sounds so big and regal for a little, kind of a dirt road town in Kentucky. Is Eminence by any chance the inspiration for Opulence?
It's not, but I like that. I like that. I like that idea.
Okay.
Um, well, inside the book, there's a sort of origin story about opulence. So there was a man who came post slavery from in my again this is fiction in my
Sure.
imagination. He came from Virginia and bought up some land. He had some money and bought up some land, and of course, the neighboring white folks were calling it in town. So
Hmm.
he decided that his hamlet would have the largest, most exquisite name, and
Ah,
so he renamed it Opulence, Kentucky. And and as he says in the book, it's been opulence ever since.
I
Uh,
love I love it. That's fantastic. Now, the title that explains the opulence. Tell me about the birds.
okay, so the birds have lots of different roles in this book. So on the cover, like you said, is a Sankofa bird. So the Sankofa is part of the Akan culture in Africa. And so the Sankofa bird symbolizes not to forget where you're from. Basically,
Mhm.
the saying that goes with it is go back and fetch it. So to me, it has a lot to do with ancestral memory. And that's sort of what I'm writing about in the book. Like, how much of what we move forward from one generation to the next, how much of it is sort of in the blood, uh, things that are totally out of our control, what you look like, maybe what you speak like. There's always somebody saying, well, you look just like grandma so and so. So that's in the blood. A big thing in this book is about mental illness. So perhaps that's inherited and that's in the blood. But also, like when it comes to decisions people make about parenting and things like that, how much of that can you leave behind? So that's one of the big themes in the book. And birds are everywhere in the book. Some of it goes with old fashioned sayings, like my grandmother used to say, mm, that's Sister Martha, show her as a bird. which meant that, which could mean a lot of things. It might mean that she's, just sort of strange. In modern terms, it means she's a hot mess. Uh, Sometimes it might mean that they're acting strange, or they have some mental illness or something like that. So it's used in that way too.
Well, now see, I feel a type of way now that you've taught me this, because when I was a kid, my Granny Bailey, when we would go visit her, she would always say, "What you two birds up to?" And now I think my granny was calling me and my mama crazy or strange, which I'm not gonna say she was wrong, but I just feel a type.
Well, maybe she might have been.
So birds, you mean that in the literal sense, but also in the figurative sense of sort of
Yeah,
odd or unusual people. So
right.
this is a now. I understood that. Was this your first novel?
It was. It
Okay.
is my first novel. Yeah, the other two are short story collections, and this is a novel, but it's also told in short sections, in vignettes.
Okay. Now, when I saw an interview that you gave, I think it was about 4 years ago, and you were talking about the process of writing this novel and it coming in vignettes, and that you really kind of had to, at a certain point, submit to what the book was telling you to do. How was your process moving from short stories to a novelized collection of vignettes like this, and how difficult was it, and how long did it take you?
Well, I think the idea of a novel was so daunting to me because I'd written poetry and then I'd written short stories for so long. So I thought that if I was going to write a novel, that it needed to be this big hunk of words, that I had to make it really big, and I had to make it as big as I possibly could, or people wouldn't believe that I could even write a novel. So I
Mm,
started out that way, and I did have a lot of words, but I realized rather quickly that, well, not really quickly because it took me over a decade to finish it. But it did start out big, or it got big at one point, and I realized that because I was writing about memory, because I was writing about mental illness, and because I was writing about so many different people, especially the women, that it almost, again, the book sort of wrestled me down and said, this is not what we want to be. And I kept saying, well, this is what people are going to expect from a novel, and I need to prove that I could do it. I went to graduate school to learn how to do this stuff. I need to do it. And
right.
I finally realized that, for me to be true to the characters and to be true to what I was trying to do in the book, that it needed to be in smaller sections. It needed to be boiled down, distilled down to the essence. And I spent a great deal of time doing that, boiling it down, distilling it down. And I realized in the end that I ended up editing it the same way that I would a poem. I read all the
Mm.
sentences out loud. I cut passages, I cut chapters, and just kept boiling it down until it got to the hefty, whatever it is now, 120,
I think it's 170.
100,
Oh,
and how many?
I've got 176 here.
Okay. Yeah, I think
Now,
in the hardback it's about 190 pages or something like that. So it's just under 200 pages.
okay. Now, I know for a fact that you are speaking to the hearts of so many of the people who watch and enjoy and listen to this show, and whether they're catching it live now or they'll catch it later, because we do have so many aspiring writers. And I'm actually looking in the comment section at one person in particular who I know is wrestling with exactly that, with trying to distill the work down to sort of the essence of it and to let it come as it comes. I know that as an educator, I'm sure you work with a lot of people who are entering the world of writing fiction, or creative writers. Could we trouble you for a little bit of free counsel and free advice for some of the folks here?
Of course, sure.
What would you say to people who are, and this is again, I'm thinking of some specific writers that I know, for people who are writing biographical stories but fictionalized versions of them. How do you get out of your own way and deal with the story that needs to be told versus the story that you think you have to tell because other people want to read it a certain way?
Mm. Um, well, I have learned to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk, because I've been teaching for years, and I would tell people one thing, and I was doing the exact opposite, as far as letting the book sort of speak to me. And James Baldwin says, you don't get the book you want, you get the book you get, and then you have to
Mm,
figure out how to deal with it. And so that's what I did, and I think it's a better book for it. I had to get out of the way of the truth, because I think the higher truth was in fiction. So
mm,
um, everyone knows this, so it's no secret. But my mother was a paranoid schizophrenic, and so I had tried for years to write about my mama, sort of head on. So I tried to write poems about her. I tried to write essays about her. And there's always, in my other two books, there some little thread of mental illness sort of floating through. Sometimes I put it in the speculative realm, and it's sort of like ghost, or comes through as something else. Um, and I was writing about her in some ways in this book, in the Birds of Opulence. And I realized that the higher truth was in the fiction, as far as what other people would get out of it, and not my mother's story.
mm.
So my mother's story is not there, but it is. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I do.
it's that same thing that I talked about. It's sort of the essence of the invisibility, the pain, the sort of unknown entity that mental illness can be, particularly in Black families, it can be in country families as well. Um, so I had to sort of give up this notion of writing. Writing about my mother head on is now reserved for the memoir that I'm writing about her.
Okay.
But it didn't go in the Birds of Opulence, not directly.
Right now, I'm a little choked up because you're kind of speaking to my heart. I'm currently working with my mother on a story that she's been trying to write her story, and I've been struggling because part of me feels like what you just said, that the higher truth is in fiction, and the parts that she worries about how she'll be viewed, whether she's alive or dead, after it comes out. And I've been talking with her about, maybe we just tell a story that has elements of this and we make it a piece of fiction. So maybe it's not your story yet, but it helps to get you to your story.
Yeah.
Um, one of our viewers says, this is so loud and I feel so seen. So I'm very convinced that you've spoken to the hearts of a lot of people. Before we move into anything else, I want to take a moment and talk about what you're writing now. So we've done the Sankofa part of it, where we've looked back. Let's
Hmm.
look forward to you have a collection coming out, the book that we talked about earlier, Perfect Black. And this is the one that the foreword is written by Nikki Finney.
Hmm.
And this is not a novel. It's also not a short story. It's a collection of poetry, but it's more than that.
It is.
What help? I don't know what to call it.
I think that's what everyone has the problem with what to call it. And I think, what I've done at this age, we don't have to say how old I am, but at this age, one of the things that's happened to me is that, I used to put my poet self over here,
Mhm.
my memoir self over here, my fiction self was usually in the middle. And one of the things that writing Birds of Opulence taught me was that all of these are the same. All of these various writers that I consider myself to be are the same. So they all came together in some ways in the Birds of Opulence. And then when I come to this new book, they're all there. So there are some pieces um, in the book that I would call lyrics. There are some sort of standard poems. There are some prose pieces, um, and they all sort of come together, I think, because they're in many ways dealing with the same subjects that I've sort of been haunted by in my previous books,
Mm,
giving glimpses into rural life and what that means to me, paying homage to um, where I'm from and the people paying homage to my family, um, social, racial justice, um, lots of topics in covered in this book.
Wonderful. Have you done any performances of works from this book yet?
I mean, no, not as it is, not as it is now. I haven't read very much from it at all. Um, I've been, even though I was an Afro-Latin poet and I used to perform with the Afro-Latin poets and I used to write poetry around that table. Um, my poetry is always something that I've hidden. When you are close to so many talented poets, Nikki Finney,
True.
uh, Frank, um, Randall Horton, on and on. I sort of kept my poetry kind of close and always deferred to fiction when we would do a reading. Almost always. In the early years, I read a lot of poetry, but almost deferred all the time. So yeah, so I'm out there now
You
with
out
this.
there. Yeah. Come
I'm out
August,
there.
you can't be clutching it to the chest. Come August, it's
Right.
the wrap. It's out. Now, would and if we're asking too much, it's fine. I understand, but we've got about 5 minutes before we move into the other show. Would
Hmm.
we be able to tempt you or plead with you to share a little bit of Perfect Black with us?
Sure. This
Thank
is a poem proper, and this is a poem that is an ode uh, to my grandfather, who was a tobacco farmer. And my grandfather, sometimes it felt as though he cared about his crops more than he did us. He sort of, I don't think I understood as a child, he sort of worried over the crops all the time, much more than he worried over us. But it's called Oh Tobacco.
Ode Tobacco.
Oh Tobacco.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. I'm trying to I'm trying to be fancy and
Just
I'm
the
messing.
the old the old form of just
Got you. I
oh
got it.
tobacco, as in an ode to tobacco. Oh tobacco, you are the warm burnt sienna of my grandfather's skin, soft like ripe leather. I cannot see you any other way but as a farmer's finest crop. You are a Kentucky tiller's livelihood. You were school clothes in August, the turkey at Thanksgiving, Christmas with all the trimmings. I close my eyes, see you tall, stately green, lined up in rows, see sweat seeping through Granddaddy's shirt as he fathered you first. You were protected by him, sometimes even more than any other thing that rooted in our earth. Just like family, you were coddled and cuddled, coaxed into making him proud. Spread out for miles, you were the only pretty thing he knew. When I think of you at the edge of winter, I see you brown and wrinkled just like Granddaddy's skin. A 10-year-old me plays in the shadows of the stripping room. The wood stove burns. Calloused hands twist through the length of your leaves. Granddaddy smiles at me, nods when he thinks I'm not looking. And you are pretty and braided, lined up in rows like a room full of brown girls with skirts hooped out for dancing.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
May we have another?
Oh no. I
I knew
guess I
I was
better get
pushing it.
you
I knew
are.
I
I
was
guess I better
pushing it.
get busy on this, right? Because I've got to read all of these when I'm out in the world. But this is I'm always sort of reconciling my country self with my now uh urban self.
Oh, I would say urbane even.
Well, so this
Go.
is called Terrain, and it's a prose poem. The map of me can't be all hills and mountains, even though I've been country all my life. The twang in my voice has moved downhill to the flatland a time or two. My taste buds have exiled themselves from fried green tomatoes and rhubarb for goat's milk and pine nuts. Still, I return to old ground time and again, a homing blackbird destined to return. I am plain, brown bag, oak and twig, mud pies and gut-wrenching gospel in the throats of old tobacco-brown men. When my spine crooks even further toward my mother, I will continue to crave the bulbous twang of wild shallots, the familiar game of oxtail and kraut boiling in a cast iron pot. I toe dive in all the rivers, seeking the whole of me, scout virtual African terrain, sifting through ancestral memories, but still I'm called back home. Through hymns sung by stout black women in large hats and flowered dresses. You have to risk the briar bush to reach the sweet dark fruit, and ain't no country woman all church and piney woods. There is pluck and cayenne pepper. There is juke joint gyrations in the young'un bearing girth of this belly and these supple hips. All roads lead me back across the waters of blood and breast milk, from ocean to river to the lake to the creek to branch and stream, back to the sweet rain, to the cold water in the glass I drink, when I thirst to know where I belong.
I want to snap, but there's no one else here. But I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna do it anyway. That
Thank
was
you.
absolutely gorgeous, and I have to say that I'm so glad that you read that, because me looking at that on the page would not have given me anywhere near the delight of listening to you twang your way through it so beautifully.
Thank you.
I sort of watched a transformation happen over you as your voice dipped into that lilt and you started pulling from the place the sorghum comes from. I was with you. I absolutely love it. For everybody who is watching and who is as enchanted as I am, they'll be able to find this book in stores in August. Is that right?
That's right. At the beginning, I think August 3rd it comes out.
Fantastic. So August 3rd, you all will be able to find your own copy of Perfect Black. And of course, I like for you to always see the cover, know what you're looking for. This is the book that you will find when you walk into a local bookstore. And hopefully, if you're fortunate and blessed to live in a city that has a black owned local bookstore, you'll be able to even do that. Ms. Crystal Wilkinson, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
out and for making our first anniversary show so very special. Now, you have agreed to stick around for a Q&A. Is that right? Are you still
Yes,
willing?
I'll stick around. Yes.
So, right after a very brief break, I'm going to pick up with the Birds of Opulence. I'm going to try and read that without embarrassing myself or doing any damage to your words. The excerpt that we have selected starts with Little Bird. And is there anything that you can tell us to set that up?
No, I think it'll stand up. It'll stand up on its own.
All right. Well, then we will do that. Thank you again so much. I'm going to go ahead and put up the title screen. We're going to do just a couple-minute break, and then when we come back, we'll be reading from The Birds of Opulence.
Thank you.
All right, and we're back. Y'all didn't know y'all were going to get that kind of a treat. I know you didn't know. And I didn't even know it was going to be that dope. Thank you again, Crystal Wilkinson, for coming out for our 1-year anniversary show. And for all of you who got an opportunity to catch that, you heard Crystal Wilkinson read from her upcoming book, Perfect Black, which is going to be out at the top of August. So this summer, Put that on your summer reading list. Make sure that you make that happen. Tonight we are going to be and I'm looking, there's so many comments here, and normally we take a little bit of time. I just want to acknowledge a few of the people that's in the room. L Jack, I'm glad to see you here, brother man. Latricia, so glad to see you. And we can see the lines that everybody was pulling out. Kamisha Umstead, wonderful to see you here. Dexter, good to see you. Good to see you. Angel Monique pulled out this line, which I absolutely love too: gut-wrenching gospel in the throat of old tobacco brown men. If that was not Willie Long when she read that, if I had a church fan, I'd have threw it. Old tobacco brown men. And then what's this other one I see here? Juke joint gyrations. Look here, getting real grown with some of these lines with the juke joint gyration. Y'all know nothing about that. All y'all young people in this room, y'all know nothing about that. Melanin Monroe here says that she is delightful, and Benyel says that she is blown away by her. Perfect Black is going to be amazing. I could not agree more. Absolutely a delight to have her here, and we're going to go right into the reading now, so that we have the opportunity to go into the Q&A, because I want to hear what she has to say about this. Like always, this is a cold read. I have not read this before, so I'm a little bit more nervous than usual. So y'all, as we used to say in church, y'all pray my strength in the Lord, and we're gonna go ahead on with it. Soon as I put the banner up, because I have a banner for this. There we go. From the Birds of Opulence, Little Bird, Francine. By late December, the pin oak and birch are drooped like weeping willows. Snow is on the ground, and Joe Brown is in Francine Clark's yard clearing a path to her car. She watches him through the window, sees him bending to pick up brush. Each branch glistens thick with the weight of ice. Talk of weather has replaced the resounding thud of Joe and Lucy's baby being dropped to the floor. Francine had been curious about the good baby, born out there in that squash field, so when she heard about the gathering from the mailman, she made her best oyster casserole and carried it up to that house. But when she heard those people inside mingling around, eating and laughing, her legs went stuck. She didn't know what had happened when they all left at once, but she heard the women talking. Those women, always with their tongues flying about somebody. Then she saw Minnie May Good at the door and caught just a glimpse of Lucy inside, with her dark, unruly hair spewed in all directions, and Joe Brown leading her off. In some strange way, Lucy was still beautiful, but she looked older, more gaunt, haggard. Exhausted by the sight, Francine turned to leave, then ducked back behind Joe Brown's tool shed until everyone had scattered. She couldn't see inside the good house, but she imagined them in there milling about from room to room, the six of them, all filled with some great love for each other. Normal, except for Lucy, tired and startled as a cat looking wildly out of place. Francine stood in the rain for a long time that afternoon. Things moved in her gut, feelings she'd never known. Jealousy, that's what she'd call it now. The strength of the Good family. She was stunned at the idea of losing Sonny before the two of them had had a chance at a real family. She would never have a family, not one like that, with a man at its center. A baby in the field and all that chaos afterward. Francine wonders what Joe thinks about all of it now. His arms, hands are working like a machine, scooping up broken limbs and placing them into the burlap bag he drags behind him through the snow, clearing the sidewalk. His eyes and head are darting all around, to the tops of trees where birds are gathering in black clusters, to the hills still white-capped. There's a rabbit at the edge of the yard, and every so often it wriggles its nose and hops in Joe's direction. Joe looks as though he's not paying attention, but he's the kind of man who sees everything. When he gets done clearing sticks and snow from the path, he'll drop a slip of paper in Francine's mailbox with his requested pay written in careful script, and she'll mail him a check first thing tomorrow. Before he leaves, he stands with his hands on his hips and watches the rabbit, still sniffing and hopping, looking for water, maybe or food. And then Joe climbs into his truck and is gone like he came, without bothering to knock on Francine's door. This pleases her. She wishes everyone acted like this. Long after Joe Brown's truck can no longer be seen or heard, Francine presses her ear to the wall and listens to the muted scratch of squirrels. She has spent the 10 years since Sunny died training herself to enjoy the occasional rustlings of some creature or a twig scratching the window, a little bit of low music, even the company of the tomcat she feeds on the back porch, but no people. People come plagued with disappointment. When gray-eyed Sonny Clark, considered a prize among the women, returned to opulence and married to Francine, cityfied, dark and big-boned, all eyes were already on the house before they'd even moved in. And the gaze has held steadfast, even since Sonny's passing. In town, they say she's an odd one, hinkty and soft, all that weight, those small, useless hands and feet. Even the skinniest women in town, though thin as runner beans, would make two of big old Francine Clark on any given workday. Francine runs her hand down the wall and crosses the living room to the kitchen. The swish of her fleshy thighs and the occasional skittering inside the plaster are all the sound in her world on this night. In the kitchen, she stirs black walnuts into cocoa, confectionery sugar, and butter. Gospel twangs through her radio, and though she doesn't particularly enjoy the country music, the words soothe her. Pass me not, O gentle Savior, hear my humble cry. While on others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry. While on others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Chocolate bubbles up and splatters against the sides of the pan. She stirs and takes in a breath deep enough to lift her large breasts. She hums along to the music, her voice lifting out, Savior, Savior. She puts the teapot on. It was just Sonny's time. Her rational mind knows it, her God-fearing heart knows it, but that part of her that remains empty, the part that Sonny used to fill up, still nudges her into believing that dying was something he could have prevented if he had loved her enough. Rained hard like that July night at the Goods house when the whole town lined up to see the famous Good baby who was born in the field. Hear ye, she thinks now. Come see Yolanda, the wonder baby, born amidst the squash. The other storm, though, power lines down, her man up before daylight. Even when day came, the sky was dark and clouds full. She shoved a paper sack filled with a piece of chocolate cake, a fried chicken breast, 2 slices of light bread into his hands. Or did I just give him 1 slice that morning? And where's my sugar? He asked before he went. The memory of that kiss makes her cheek warm. She pours the remains of the walnut kernels into the batter. Saw lightning strike. A beautiful thing. Lightning, zigging and zagging like pictures of heaven in her King James Bible, her Sonny, surrounded by light like a halo. Struck by lightning. What were the chances of that? One of the men who dragged Sonny into the living room said. And living? Another added. Lit up like fireworks on the 4th. Like Jesus. Francine adds more confectionery sugar to the candy. They came in, 2 of them, wet and dirty, and placed Sonny on the sofa. He was groaning, his face twisted to one side, like he'd had a stroke. Smell of burnt flesh, like meat cooking. Toes of his shoes blown out by the force of the current, his clothes shambled down to his underclothes. Those men taking little glances around like they were being let in on a secret. I can still feel it go clean through me, Sonny told her. He held his hands out to her. My fingers and toes, my arms. He hollered out in the night in pain. Doc came, said he'd be all right. Sonny coiled up like a baby laid on her breast. I can't go back out there, he said, just like a scared boy. And she held him like that, comforted him like that, like some child. I can't go, he said. But he had. He went back to working on the power lines, came back to himself. And then, just when Francine had gotten some Sonny back, some Sonny, enough to satisfy her, all was lost again. He just laid down and died. Took something as simple as a headache one night. and died. Aneurysm, they'd said. Fought off a lightning bolt for no reason. She stirs the fudge again, feels a funny yank in her belly and mistakes it for grief. Francine still looks all around this house like it doesn't quite belong to her. Small, somebody's fairy tale house, bright yellow with brocade high back chairs that barely hold her, and an enormous sofa on swirling claw shaped feet. Everything is clean. When she's not reading the Bible, she's scrubbing the sink, baseboards, and floors. Though Francine Clark's mind has just returned from a 10-year journey, she now stands in her own kitchen and is 46 years and 112 miles away. She is 7 years old in the house she grew up in on Oak Street in Louisville. A large house, enviable by any standard. A house that could swallow the small house she lives in now at least twice, even 3 times, she suspects. It had a winding staircase that connected the 2 stories and shiny hardwood floors. Her honey-coated father, his navy suit fresh from the cleaners, and her mother, deep, deep brown with a bit of Europe dancing in her face, the elongated nose, pointy chin, and thin lips. Francine at the bottom of the stairs in her nightgown, looking up at her parents, swimming in the possibilities of her own future. But those memories, they flit, glow with hope, and then disappear like lightning bugs. Nervous breakdown. What a funny way to describe someone's malady. Breakdown, as though her mother were an appliance or a car. Her smiling, popular mother, Helen Vernon, that mother who smelled like sun-ripened peaches and kissed her father gently and softly, like his lips were something breakable. The mother who doted on her father as if she loved him more than any other thing. That mother, the one she had known until then, disappeared one day. Overnight, it seemed to Francine now. Her hair lay on her shoulders uncombed for days. Later, it would go for months, even years, because of her fear that combing it would be the signal for someone in the asylum to come take her away. She refused to bathe because she was convinced she would drown. This woman, Francine's mother, who had once walked with confidence and grace, now cowered in a corner, bawled into herself like a baby, afraid of something, afraid of everything. Francine was 15 years old when her father just left. "Daddy can't take it no more," he said. Francine stared at the ceiling while her father hugged her and cried. She felt the weight of him bearing down on her as he sobbed, but she held her arms straight down by her sides, like a soldier standing at attention. She refused to hug him back. She refused to cry. After he left, and for years afterward, Francine simply existed in her mother's house. She refused to acknowledge or touch the woman, though sometimes she would sit at the top of the stairs or peek around the corner and watch her. It wasn't understanding that she sought. That was unfathomable. She just wanted to remember every sign of madness so she could avoid it in her own life. Helen Vernon fed herself sometimes, seeming normal, cooking a nice dinner for them both. Other times she discarded the whole meal in the trash because she thought she saw roaches in it or believed it was poisoned. Francine's father brought food to the house every week, but Francine usually stayed out from underfoot when he arrived, observing him from across the room. "Come give Daddy a hug?" he would ask her sometimes. But Francine refused his hugs and ghosted herself somewhere in the house until she heard him turn the key and leave. Francine hums it all back to where it came from and spoons chocolate onto wax paper. She has just licked her fingers clean when a sharp pain hits her stomach. She paces a few steps bent over and holds on to the counter, hoping this kink in her middle will work itself out. The kink subsides a little, and though she's startled and still feeling a little bit of pain, she straightens her dress and returns to the stove. She wipes splatters from the range with her dishcloth, then another stab strikes her. This one takes her to her knees. As she lies down to rest on the linoleum, Francine notices a spot of dirt that she somehow missed. A tiny spot, size of a $50. shadowed by the table leg. She tries to get at it with her finger. The teapot whistles. She cooks for church members when there's occasion, a funeral, a baptism, a baby born, but she doesn't talk much. She is merely Sonny's wife, that woman, still a stranger after all these years. She cherishes this. Folks don't bother strangers much. They just let them be. She doesn't want anyone clamoring around, but she does think about calling on somebody now, until she remembers people pouring out of Minnie Mae Good's house into the July heat like bugs, carrying the story with them. She wants no part of that, even if her gallbladder is bursting. When the pain lessens again, Francine pulls herself up on all fours. Francine Lynette Clark, get yourself in order. She stands, though she keeps her back humped over, and places a tea bag inside her china cup. She pours a bit of hot water, douses the bag several times. She leaves the fudge cooling on the counter and the remnants in the pan scorching. The cabinet door is still open. That spot on the floor. These things taunt her. She manages to ease herself into a high-backed chair. She tries to relax her muscles, rubs at the small of her back, her side. The tea scalds her throat as it goes down. Her wedding band still gleams on her finger. Sometimes just looking at it calms her nerves. Must be 10 people standing on top of me. Something I ate? Sonny Clark, your wife is vexed. There are women who do this all the time. Women who don't know where their babies came from, who have menstrual cycles all through their pregnancies. Women who refuse to remember tragedy, women who were raped. Then there are the women who live one life by day and another by night. It is not known which category Francine Clark is in, so each resident in town puts her where they want her. Some will shift her to the double life category. Others will place her neatly in the box labeled rape, but nobody knows for sure. Some of the women will later say they noticed that she had gained more weight, but nobody had expected she was pregnant. Pregnant was the last thing that she could ever be. All except Minnie Mae Good, who had rightly said no more than 6 months ago during her own family's chaos, "Something funny about that woman there." But even she had dismissed it as a sign of melancholy. Some will say she knew. Some will say she couldn't have known, that if she had, she would have called in some of Sonny's people, even though she doesn't speak to them. No woman in her right mind would willingly do this. A scared teenager, maybe, but not some old widow woman. Not in these modern times. Word will make its way. Francine Clark, church-going widow woman, calls the life squad for a bellyache and pops up with a black-headed baby girl. And brought the baby home swaddled in a blanket donated from some white church in town without a diaper pin nor a bassinet to her name. Old as she is. I ought to know better, the women will add. And this is how Minnie Mae Good's tribe will reclaim a little bit of their dignity. All that other talk from 6 months back about Lucy Good Brown having a baby amid the squashes, then losing her natural mind and whooping and hollering and dropping off the baby in the middle of the floor for all to see will be put to rest for a while. This new story fills up every dusty corner, every sly grin, every single drop of spit from every working tongue. Mona's entrance into the world will make men's heads tilt in confusion and cause old women to gossip with their hands on their hips. Over tea in one another's kitchens for the rest of the winter, they will speculate that a woman like Francine Clark is apt to run off or give the baby up. She don't know nothing, they'll say. Ain't seen an honest day's work in her life. When Francine brings her baby home, curtains and shades open up and close and all down the road until the strange car headed toward the Clark place is out of sight. Francine steps from the car and thanks the woman, her back straight but her eyes cast slightly downward. The plump, short, white woman, a social worker from the hospital, watches as Francine walks gingerly across the icy sidewalk while balancing the baby, a handful of bottles, a box of baby powder, and 5 diapers, all provided by the hospital. A gust of cold wind picks up the edge of Francine's brown skirt tail, and she grimaces. The hospital woman focuses in on the house. She has expected something different, something low class and run down. especially with no father to be seen. "Yoo-hoo, Miss Clark!" she yells from the window, her breath puffing out smoke from the cold. "You need help in?" Snow is beginning to fall again. "No, thank you kindly." Francine trundles as quickly as her frame will let her up the porch step and over the tomcat weaving around her ankles. She fumbles for her keys with one hand and has the door open before the hospital woman is out of the car. A flock of sparrows takes off from the edge of the house and dusts the ground with fresh snow. "Miss Clark!" The woman runs behind Francine like she's forgotten something. "Wait, I just wanted to wish." Francine Clark steps across her own threshold, steadies her senses against the stench of burnt chocolate that remains in her air, and quickly closes her door. She drops the supplies to the floor, then shrugs her arms out of her coat and lays it across one of the kitchen chairs. She uncovers Mona's face, traces the roundness of her cheeks and lips with her finger. A little bird she is. A little bird. Francie can hear the white woman's boots crunch in the snow outside the door, the sound drifting away and away, up into the trees. And then it hits her. "Sonny, it's Christmas," she says. "And look what I've done." 1963. Summer birds touch the visitors. Francine. By June, the summer birds have returned, and this thing Francine Clark has done is still fresh on every tongue. For months, even through winter, townswomen have come in small cluster to Francine's door, trying to exchange her secret for a peck or bushel of something. Francine keeps to her volition and greets them only by cracking the door the tiniest bit or yelling, "Yes, who is it?" through 3 inches of fine oak. "It's Sister so and so. Just thought you might need something. Brought you some pie." Sometimes it's big boy tomatoes, silver queen corn, diapers, or milk. "No, thank you," Francine answers in return. They always knock a second time, and Francine responds with silence. Every Thursday, Francine places her baby on the floorboard of sunny Thunderbirds and drives to Lexington. Every Thursday, Francine places her baby on the floorboard of Sunny's Thunderbird and drives to Lexington. She pushes a grocery cart through a river of unfamiliar people, relieved that not a soul knows her name. She writes a check on Sunny's pension for canned goods, flour, sugar, rice, beans, sweet potatoes, and cornmeal. She delights in cans of sugar peas and square red and white boxes of instant mashed potatoes. Her list, written in her steady, perfect cursive, reads: June 6, 1963. Can of coffee, bag of McIntosh apples, 12 rib steaks freeze half, 2 loaves of bread on sale 29 cents, butter, ketchup, cream of wheat for Mona, fudge sandwich cookies, fig Newtons, eggs 1 dozen, Texas onions 1 bag, cottage ham, 5 pot pies, grape preserves 2 jars, milk for Mona. When she returns home, Francine promises herself for the umpteenth time that she'll get Joe Brown to cut the grass, to trim back the hedges. Joe Brown is a man who will not deny her peace. The grass whooshes against her leg. She balances a bag of groceries in the scoop of her left arm and Mona in her right. Her pocketbook is twisted around her wrist and she's leaning to one side. By the time she reaches the door, the paper sack falls to the ground. Francine is breathing heavy. Sweat trickles between her breasts. A large chunk of her perfect hairdo slips from the bun. She balances baby and pocketbook, places keys into the lock, turns the knob, and opens the door with her foot. The piney smell of the freshly mopped floor greets them, and Francine is immediately comforted. She lays Mona on the sofa and steps back out to gather her spilled bounty. She comes back inside and begins to put the groceries away. She stuffs pot pies in the box freezer on the back porch, has to move around ice cream, frozen meat, and vegetables to make it all fit. "Sonny, you did well with this one," she thinks, remembering the summer he enclosed the porch and brought the freezer. He'd been so pleased with his garden and thought she might want to can some of his green beans, his okra, his corn. He settled for freezing, put out porch chairs so they could keep a watch over the garden and see the sun set over the ridge. She touches Sonny's favorite chair and feels the now worn edge of wood. She looks out at the tall weeds where the garden spot used to be, and then up toward the tree-covered hills. Nothing. There was a time she would sit with him for hours, those little black bugs flying at the corners of her eyes, the evening chill creeping in, but she stayed, holding Sonny's hand while he gazed out at the land. Francine slips back into the house and squeezes dried goods into a cupboard. 2 boxes of macaroni tumble out onto the floor. There are already 2 dozen eggs in the refrigerator and 2 gallons of souring milk, but she wedges the third in somehow. Her square face is pensive, deliberate, focused. She feels the weight of this task fully, a tightening in her chest like a mighty bolt. She stands in the kitchen, catches her breath, and in the usual way when she becomes still, memory comes rushing in. Shame is buried beneath the folds of soft tissue around her stomach. She rubs her fat hands through the sweat on her neck and fidgets with her bra, where sweat drips down to her navel. After her mother's breakdown, Francine burned all her dolls on the rubbish pile in the backyard. It seemed like the thing to do at the time, putting girlish things behind her. But then she saw a girl in her neighborhood playing with dolls on the porch in the afternoons. That's when she divided herself into 2 Francines. Francine Vernon, the lady of the house, looking after herself like a grown woman, and another Francine Verdon, hidden between her breasts, lurking somewhere between her ribs, curled up into the girl she was, longing for the rubbery touch of baby dolls in her hands. Years later, when Sonny Clark, with his drawl and rust-colored complexion, came to the Kentucky Derby and bypassed all the pretty light-skinned girls to get to her, Francine knew her escape was finally within reach. She wasn't soft-eyed about Sonny then, just eager to leave home. When they first married, they rented a little apartment right off Broadway near 34th Street. It was nice to have a place that she could keep clean and cook in and enjoy without her mother's breakdown floating around her. Sonny was her passage out of darkness, but before long, her appreciation turned into love. So when he asked her to leave Louisville and moved back to Opulence with him, she said yes. Without hesitation, she said yes. In Francine's 5th year away, Helen Vernon died. The doctor said it was ovarian cancer. Helen hadn't seen a doctor in over 20 years. A short, gray-looking white man tried to tell Francine about the condition Helen Vernon was found in, but Francine didn't want to know. She patted his hand and said, "Thank you kindly," before he even finished the story. She made funeral arrangements. She placed a picture of her mother before the breakdown upon the closed silver casket. No one else attended. Not a relative, not a friend, not even her father, who called and told her that he had to work. After being restored to its former dignity, the house sold quickly. It was all over, and Francine was relieved. And now here she is, smothered beneath her own skin, smothered beneath all this worry. So she hoards food in the house, in her body, just like the mother squirrel inside the wall. The baby coos and at this moment seems content with herself, kicking her legs about. It's hard for Francine to believe that this little girl came from down there, from inside of her. Sonny is everywhere, washing his hands in the sink, opening the refrigerator. He comes to her, a milky apparition. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. She removes the pot of 6 boiled nipples and matching bottles from the stove. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. She screws on the tops of the bottles and places them in the cabinet. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pains we bear. She pours milk into the other 3, replaces the water, and turns on the stove. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. She puts 2 fresh bottles in the refrigerator and 1 in the pan of water to warm. cleans the counters, hums. Mm-hmm. Mona's legs are kicking harder now. The sounds she makes are the sounds of agitation, but Francine remembers the 5 pound sack of sweet potatoes in the trunk of the car. By the time she is out on the steps and into the driveway, Mona is in full squall, her cries so shrill that birds fly up from the trees in the front yard and circle before they land again. Francine retrieves the potatoes from the trunk and then hears the swishing sound of grass being splayed by feet. Sister Clark, we just thought we'd stop by and see how you was doing. Ain't seen you in church. Not for a while, a second voice joins in. 6 months or so. Two women step into the clearing between the car and the house. Aberdeen Butler, carrying a basket of something with a gingham dish towel over it, and Hazel Sloan, holding a large paper bag with collard greens sprouting from the top. Been busy, Francine says and tries to go around the women and head for the open door. The tomcat is mewling on the porch. Your baby sure is crying up a storm, Hazel Sloan says. Girl, wasn't it? Yes. Excuse me. Francine moves around the women and onto the porch. Lord's house misses you. Idle mind is, you know. Here, cornbread to go with the collards, greens, right from Hazel's garden. They are taken over all over the place. Hazel chuckles a little from the back of her throat. I'm sure Joe Brown would cut this grass for you for a little bit of nothing. Getting kind of high, ain't it? Baby's got good lungs. She all right? Francine heads for the door, but turns briefly to look at the women before she climbs the steps. The women eyeball one another and climb the steps behind her. She tries to stop them, but they are already inside. Francine sighs loud enough to set off a warning. She thought country people at least had manners. She sets the bag of sweet potatoes down by the door, coming up in someone's home. She scoops Mona up off the couch, just inviting themselves in. She bounces Mona and pats her back. Your house sure is pretty. Aberdeen is spinning around slowly, looking in every direction. Hazel Sloan focuses on the baby and the awkward way Francine Clark grips the child around the chest, slumped like a dog, her head wagging. Won't you look at that precious little thing? Oh, honey, you've got to support her head. What's her name? Aberdeen says and scrunches up her face in the way Francine Clark is swaying the baby back and forth. They listen for any hint in the name, looking for features they can recognize on the tiny face. Oh, honey, I can tell you ain't been around no babies. Let me hold her for a minute. You got her twisted every which way. A panic is rising in Francine's gut. Well, thank you so much, ladies, but I really need to put her to sleep. She's gotten a little bit of colic. Her voice is strained and has the false lilt of her mother's. She has never been the type of woman to fight, but feels that low-class urge mounting in her now. She holds out her free arm and wiggles her hand as though shooing chickens. Colic? Best thing for colic is, ladies, you should get Minnie Mae Good to blow smoke on her. That's the best cure. Worked on my young'uns. Here, let me. Aberdeen reaches for the baby. No. The baby is quiet now, swaying beneath Francine Clark's arm, her eyes wide and focused. Hazel and Aberdeen have never seen anything like it. This way she's holding the baby, away from her, dangling like a, no. There is a tremble in Francine's voice. Her lip quivers. Something rolls through her hot and quick as thunder. Aberdeen Butler is so close that Francine can smell her breath and see the tiny hairs above her lip, the faded pink where her lipstick has been, flecks of red in the whites of her eyes. But what startles Francine most is Aberdeen's hand on her arm. First time she's been touched by somebody grown since being in the hospital, but that didn't count. This is the first time she's been touched since in her sleep. She thought the knock on the door was Sonny coming home from working the power lines. So she opened the door and buried herself into his chest. The smell was sunny and not quite sunny. Sweet smell of man sweat. He kissed her long and hard, and yes, some fight rose up in her. But behind her closed eyes, a cloudy vision of Sonny manifested itself and held her in the flesh. She refused to open her eyes, even when the voice that said, "Now put your leg over here," didn't sound like Sonny at all. And when she was spent, he kissed up her thighs and all along the sweaty mounds of her fleshy stomach. and even in the creases beneath them and the insides of each of her flabby arms. Beautiful, he said before he entered her gently, and even when she felt him spilling warm inside her, she didn't open her eyes. And when she felt the bed shift as he retreated from it, she kept her eyes closed tight and held on to her vision of Sonny. And he knelt. Was he on one knee? And kissed her forehead, leaving behind a tiny wet spot that lingered there after a while, after he had gone. And even when the kiss had dissipated into the cool air of the empty room, long after she heard the door close behind him and the scent they had made in the bed was all that remained, she still didn't open her eyes. And now this thing whirs through her, and a pendulum swings itself back and forth, and sweat pours, and her eyes are on that spot between the collarbone and Aberdeen Butler's sweet neck, a harbor to cry into, and she can nearly feel Aberdeen Butler's garden-worked hand on her back and the warmth of their bodies touching. She can hear Aberdeen's soft voice whispering in her ear, sees all the women of opulence gathered there in her living room, and her being folded into their circle, many made good at the center, receiving her with full open arms. Aberdeen so close, sweet voiced breath of a woman's assuring words. She sees all this, hears it, nearly feels it before she raises her palm and slaps Aberdeen's face. Best you all get home, she says. Aberdeen, who has stumbled backward from the blow and landed on the floor, scrambles to her feet. I said, get out my house. Francine screams so loud her voice turns hoarse, and the loose skin beneath her chin shakes a little. We'll pray for you, Francine Clark, Hazel Sloan says. She places the greens and cornbread on the table. And that young'un, too. Mona begins to cry again. Aberdeen rushes toward Francine, but Hazel Sloan grabs her around the waist and pulls her toward the door. You better be glad you're holding that baby. I'm a church-going woman, but all the devil ain't out me yet. I'm going to pray for you. Whole church gonna pray for you, Hazel Sloan says, pointing her finger before she grabs Aberdeen by the arm and is gone. After she shuts the door, Francine retrieves the bottle warming on the stove. She jiggles the baby on the expanse of her belly until the child begins to calm. Francine Clark sways back and forth, then draws the warm nipple of the bottle to Mona's mouth. The tomcat comes out from behind the couch and begins to rub against her legs. Must have rushed in when the door was open. Francine struggles back up off the couch. Filthy thing. Out you go too. She reopens the door and scoots the cat out with her foot. The grass looks like it has grown even more in the time she's been in the house. She can see the top of Hazel Sloan's head. She's on tiptoe, trying to peep back through the living room window. But the shrubs are too high. And there's nothing more to see. And thus endeth the story. Ooh, she smacked her in the head. Yo, I wasn't ready for that. I didn't know where it was going. I was all ready for the warm, tight embrace and the sister love. And she smacked the shit. I don't know if Miss Crystal Wilkinson cusses, so I ain't gonna say it, but you know what she smacked the. I'm gonna say hellfire. My mama would say she slapped the cowboy something out of somebody. I am okay. I love that story, and I can't wait to read the rest of it. Let me go on and look at some of these comments before we invite Sister. I'm going to use Sister Wilkinson now, Sister Crystal. Before we invite Sister Crystal back in, let's see what we see. There are so many of you all. First of all, so many comments and just appreciation again for the beautiful, beautiful poetry that's in Perfect Black. Let's see some of the lines. We see that Gwen joined us. Hey, Gwen, good to see you. Latricia pulled this one out, which I love. Dying is something he could have prevented if he had loved her enough. Oof. And then this one here, Gwen says that she's glad she ain't hug his punk ass back. Now I'm trying not to cuss, but I can't say necessarily that the viewers ain't gonna cuss. The definition that fell out this part, she is Sonny's wife, that woman. I love seeing the lines that you all pull. And this one here, I like this one. There are women who live one life by day and another by night. For those of you all who remember when we read Water Street, that's exactly how Water Street was set up, that there were some lives that people had in the day and some lives that people had at night. And similarly, Water Street, the way it was set up were vignettes, and you would see some people's daytime stories and some people's nighttime stories. So I had a little bit of a private smile in that moment. There was another part in the grocery list when you got to the Fig Newtons, because I'm thinking about the Fig Newtons that's up in the cupboard. That's like my mom's favorite thing. It's a pleasure that she shares with another one of the viewers of this show who's a fan. Loving the gospel songs, Angela Lee Reen says, and Angel Monique paints it, catches it right there. Busybody, just busy. Those are two other kind of birds. The kind that's always hopping around, pecking, looking for something, grabbing onto it, and then taking it back to where they live. That's the kind of birds they were. I saw the bird in them, Sister Crystal. I saw the bird as soon as they popped up. I did. Only now interested in helping. Exactly. They ain't here for no help. They're here for the gossip. Okay, let's see what Gwen says here. Oh gosh, I'm getting PTSD from when I first had my daughter and women were fussing over her, and yeah. I suspect that this is a shared experience. Gwen later goes on to say that smack was deserved. Angel Monique says she slapped the fire out of her. Judy Lee says she got what she was asking for. I don't think anybody has any sympathy for Aberdeen, which is a shame, because all she did was bring some greens and try to hold a baby. That's it. That's all she did. But I still feel like she had that slap coming. Kelly Ruff says that she's so glad she was able to join tonight. And listen, for all of you who have been able to join tonight, I'm so glad that you're here. Again, this is our 1 year anniversary. It's a BFD right now. And for those of you all who are absolutely in love with that story, The Birds of Opulence is the book that you want. Let me go ahead and show you the image one more again, because you need to know what to look for when you stop into your local bookstore. This is what it looks like. This is the cover of it. And we want you to order that. If you can't find it in your local bookstore, make sure that you order it from a Black bookstore, because we love supporting Black bookstores. Supporting Black authors by buying Black books in Black bookstores is just the blackest thing you could possibly do. And it thrills us when you do it. Now, I also want to let you all know, because I know some of you are already in love and some of you are trying to figure out, where can I get my hands on some more Crystal Wilkinson? Look at the bottom of your screen. That scroll right there, that is her latest essay, which is available right now. You can find, matter of fact, let me post it up so those of you who are following on Facebook can just go ahead and click the link. You'll be able to find this essay, which is called COVID Kitchen. So this is very, very timely. You'll be able to find and read that, and while you're holding your peace, waiting for Perfect Black to come out. So now that I've rambled and rumbled for a whole good little minute, let's bring Sister Crystal back in, and we're going to be ready for your questions. Wow, absolutely loved that.
Wow to you. Like, I need to sign you up for the audiobook. That was amazing.
Hey, if they ask you who you want and you want me, by all means, I'll do it for free. I loved it. It was absolutely spectacular. Wow. So give us a little bit of context about France. I mean, I feel like we got a good chunk of her life.
Mm-hmm.
How does she fit into the overall novel? Like, who is she in this town?
So Francine is the outsider, or one of the outsiders, in the family. Well, not in that family. She has moved to Opulence just because of Sonny, and ended up staying there. And so she has this baby, this mystery baby. She's not dating anybody. She's not seeing anybody. So she has this, like much small town gossip. She has a baby, and everybody's going crazy because they don't know who the daddy is.
Right.
And she lives the rest of her life not really telling anybody, even though you as a reader will probably figure it out when you read the book. But her daughter, Mona,
Mm-hmm.
and Yolanda are born like 6 months apart. Yolanda is born in the squash patch. And
now,
this baby?
Why we got squash patch kids? I ain't had them dolls growing up. Why do you have little squash patch children? What's that story about?
So the family went to their home place to pick some vegetables, and the mother goes in labor. And it's the 60s, so it is a time where they could have taken her to the hospital, but her mother was there and her grandmother was there, so they just took care of it like women will do.
Okay.
And so she ends up having the baby in the squash patch.
And she drops the baby on the floor.
Yeah, she is having some issues with some mental issues, and so
Okay.
she doesn't want all the people in the house. Similarly to Francine, Francine has found a way to keep the community out, but
Smacking the shit out of them.
right,
That'll keep
but
people out your house.
but Yolanda's mama is beholden to her mother and her grandmother. They all live in the same house, and so the grandmother says is a sort of a matriarch in the community, and she says we're gonna have some people over to celebrate this baby that was born in the squash patch.
Mhm.
And she didn't want that necessarily. She wasn't ready for all of that. So people keep asking her questions. People keep trying to see the baby, and she just kind of has a moment where she kind of loses it and drops the baby in the floor. The baby's okay.
Okay, so this was an incident that happened when I read it. When I read it the first time, when I read the first line and it said the thumping, I thought this was a continuous thing, and I'm like, they just keep dropping the baby on the floor. Like, is this literally a bouncing baby? Like, okay, so that
No,
helps me understand. So now Mona and the good baby. What did you say? The good Yolanda.
Yolanda.
Mona and Yolanda. Do they become friends? Are they now like the next generation sort of?
They are, yeah, they
Okay.
are, and they become friends. And actually, they show up as teenagers and as young women in Water Street. So they're in Water Street too.
Wait a
But
minute.
but
Hold on.
Birds
Do
of
we read
Opulence is
Yolanda?
set. Yeah, it's a continuation, or really
Okay.
before Water Street.
Dope. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. What you were saying?
Oh, I was saying it's sort of a continuation in that you learn. They're friends in Water Street, and then they're born in the Birds of Opulence, and you get to see the circumstances of their birth and the circumstances of their familial ties, their family ties, and so you see kind of the reasons that they are the way that they are as teenagers and as young adults.
I love it. So you have there's a whole universe built around opulence and now is
Yeah, you were
is Water
saying that
Street in
Rion.
opulence?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, you had said that Rion's been on. He and I are friends, and we've talked about this before. This sort of invention of a town and basing most of your writing around the same town. So we've both done that, and we've talked about that before as one of our literary conversations.
I love it. It's absolutely spectacular, and it really does make for incredible reading. We have a great love for his works here too, Insurrection and the World Does Not Require You, and just how it takes this surrealist bent, and
Yeah,
it's all sort of in this one location. You're like, how is how is just this one really crazy city with magic talking trees and fruit that messes your face up and carnivals where people turn into tropes of stereotypes is really wild. Now, you mentioned earlier in the sort of pre-show interview, you mentioned that in some of your stories you take things into a speculative fiction realm. And I've thus far categorized you as sort of folk modern folk stories.
hmm
Tell me a little bit about how these bend into speculative fiction. And also, before you answer, folks, this is your opportunity for the Q&A. So I want to see questions popping up in the comments because I know y'all have them. You can't let me ask all the questions. This is it. It's not like she's gonna be here every week. So ask your questions now. Now, go ahead and please tell me a little bit about the speculative fiction.
So, I think the birds come into play that serve as a little bit of real magic in this book. It doesn't go speculative a lot, but actually the opening is Yolanda in utero, like she's in the belly narrating the story before she's born. So that's how it opens. And my speculation usually comes from the same place, from how old people will say that child looked like it's been here before.
Yes,
Uh,
Lord.
so so that's sort of the manifestation of that she's able to sort of at least sort of spiritually see what's going on with her family before she's even born, and sees how she's going to fit into this family.
So she's looking down on her family, the family she's sort of being assigned to, and is
Yes.
working out how she's going to fit it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
And she's in utero. She's in her mother's womb. Even before the morning after church, even before that's the day that she's born. And she's saying, she's narrating before, she's basically narrating her own birth.
I cannot wait to dig more into this. And because these are oriented as vignettes, it's something easy for us to kind of break out into the program and read sections. It's one of the things that I struggle there are so many wonderful novels out there, and I struggle with introducing novels into the show because it's tough to find like a good break. To be like, okay, this is a part that I can pull and read, and even if I ain't read no more on the show, it'll give people a satisfying story. But I love how well these tie together and break apart. It's like a perfect pan of yeast rolls. There's all one piece of bread if you want it to be, if you're gonna be that person, but you break them apart and they're all nice little individual pieces. One of our viewers, Kamisha Umstead, who is a writer herself, says, I love the imagery your writing invokes. I can see what you're describing. And I told you before, when we were doing the sound check, that that's one of the things that a lot of our viewers love, was just how lush and visual your style is. Are there any plans for adapting your works, any of your works, into another medium, whether it be stage or
Um,
screen?
I wish, like, well, actually, there's a stage play that someone in Louisville did several years ago of Blackberries, and so that's been on the stage, and I hope it comes back to the stage again. And the other ones, people keep expressing interest in the Birds of Opulence, because I don't think there's been any television shows or films about Black Appalachians. And so I keep getting, I've had like at least half a dozen requests to see it, but because there's so many generations, everybody keeps saying the same thing, that it would be expensive to make.
Oh,
And so no one's quite, like, it's almost been taken twice and then they backed out. They love it, but they don't see how they couldn't do it on their budget.
when, but okay.
So
I can sense your frustration with it, because you're telling me this for the first time, and I'm livid because I think of all of the things that they managed to find budget for, that gets greenlit and put out. In your ideal world, like, forget their budgets and their hesitations, how would you like to see it done? And just for shiggles, for a little bit of fan casting, because I'm trying to see Joe Brown. Who is Joe Brown? If you had to
mm,
fan cast him,
um, it depends on what age they're depicting him, but I could see like uh, a Denzel Washington. But if there's a younger Joe, I'm trying to think of who it would be.
David Washington.
Yeah, yes,
I mean, he's there.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you all need to get in touch with Ava DuVernay, and Oprah. Make sure you hit them up and let
And
them
start
know that it
campaigning
needs.
for it. For sure, for sure. Hold on, let's see. We've got Rose Bloom of Rose Bloom Management Group says your book seems to challenge form, or at least rebel against traditional storytelling forms. Is there anything about form that captivates you? And do you challenge norms on purpose?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been teaching creative writing for a long time, so I have, uh, I teach tradition, um, but I think you have to sort of know the tradition before you buck the tradition. So
Hmm.
I do know how to write standard plots, although that's not particularly my thing, and I do prefer free form as far as poetry is concerned. I've worked in some contemporary forms of poetry, but I really like the free form best. Um, the lyric and the prose poem. I think I'm primarily a storyteller, um, even though it may not have the traditional exposition and rising action and climax and falling action and denouement and all of those things. But I like bucking the traditional structure because I think that as Black people and as country folks, we don't, it takes us a long time to tell a story. There may not be a plot, but
Right.
but when we tell the story, we're going to bring some character to it. We're going to try to make it as alive as possible while we're telling it. I rely a lot on oral narration and the oral traditions. So yes, it's all intentional, but I do like bucking the sort of mainstream normative narratology. Like my narration is not, I think I told an audience once that my third person voice was not this sort of mainstream sort of Walter Cronkite voice that why can't my third person narrator be like some version of my grandmother,
Right.
being twangy and country and in her power as a primary storytelling voice. So I also think about that and think about the story and how it fits on the tongue, which is certainly not anything new. Tony K. Bombaro did it. Toni Morrison does it. Ernest Gaines did it. Randall Keenan did it. So many storytellers that are. Rion does that too, to a certain extent. So
True. When we were reading Rolling in My Sixth Fold, there were a lot of parts where I was like, oh, I have not made my tongue move in these shapes in a very long time. It's a lot of swallowing words and pushing. Now, I'm sorry, I forgot. I meant to ask, give us a little bit of Francine, fan cast Francine for us, because I'm trying to see her.
Again, depending on her age, you know who I would like to see play Francine?
Tell me.
Lizzo.
Word? Do you think she would feel as good as hell doing it?
Yes. Yes.
I don't know. I don't know if have we seen Lizzo act?
No, we
But
need
she's
to.
got the you feel like she's got the energy and the form and the right energy for it.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
she could do it.
Okay. So then maybe that's what we need to do, because she still got some heat on her. So maybe we reach out to Lizzo, show her this little section, be like, you would kill this. Then Lizzo takes it to her agent, and we know Oprah already liked Lizzo, and we just kind of get it going that way.
And there we go. I'm ready.
I feel like we could mount a little bit of a movement behind this. I want to make sure that I honor the folks' questions, because they're asking, and I got to host a show. I can't just chat with you on my own. Kamisha wants to know, do you have a writing ritual?
I have a writing ritual. It's not as tight as it used to be. When I'm writing at my height, I really believe in the early morning. Early morning. So when I'm writing at my height in the midst of a project, I'll get up at 3 or 4 and write toward the sun.
Oh, you meant the farmer morning.
Yes.
I thought you meant early morning, like I have a commute.
Right towards 7. And when my mom was still alive, my mama would call me every day at 7 o'clock. So I think that habit started trying to write before I got that phone call, and then trying to write. And when my kids were little, same thing, trying to write before the kids got up, trying to write before I needed to grade papers or whatever else it was. Like, so I think that's like the golden time. I had a student one time that came in and was all floppy in class, and I was like, what is wrong, Jeff? And he said, I've been trying to do your technique and I just can't do it. He was so funny. And I said, well, you got to find your own path. Your path, my path might not be your path. And he's like, I can't party till 1 o'clock and get up at 3 and write. And I was like, no.
Maybe put the partying part down, right?
Right. It's not for you. But that's the big part of my ritual, is to try to have time and space and make time and space. Yes, Gwen said those are really the best hours to write. I agree. When you can be quiet with your mind.
I absolutely feel that it's a struggle for me. I find that I can't get up at 3, but if I can stay up till 3, I can get some good writing, and that's when I find that my characters get real chatty. And more often than not, it'll be I'll stay up till around 2:30, 3 o'clock, and then I put my head on my pillow because I think I'm done, and that's when they start talking. And when you have to get up out the bed and be like, "All right, what'd you say?" and just sort
Right.
of take that dictation. Angela Lee wants to know: did you always want to write books, even as a child?
I did. I was an only child in the house with grandparents, and so that was mostly my play. I mean, I had dolls and I played with other things, but I always wrote books. And my grandmother always told the story that it started with reading, and she taught me how to read before I went to school. And then when I could read on my own, it was on. I was reading everything, things I wasn't supposed to read. I read everything in the house. And she said that after I read everything in the house, then I started writing my own books after I had read all the books that I could come across. But it was always an inspiration. When my grandmother died, she had this big notebook that was about this fat, and it was full of all of my bad rhyming poems and my little stories. And I guess when I was about 10 years old, I wrote my first book, which was just notebook paper, and it had the novel was called My Dream Come True, and I had taken my grandmother's sewing machine and sewed down the side of it.
Do you still have that now?
I do. It's
Wow.
it's actually in this room in the closet.
Wow. Now, do you find now as a mature writer that you revisit any of those themes? Have you evolved any of those stories into grown-up versions of what you had done then?
I think my writing was more speculative then, and I think that I was such a voracious learner, and I still am, that I have these curiosities that I follow. And so a lot of my stories then were about I was just learning via roots and reading. I was just learning about slavery and where we came from. And I remember having a story about a little girl who finds some sort of heirloom in an African heirloom in a trunk, and that becomes a sort of a magical time. That was one of my early stories, but a lot of them was, I was kind of a mess. I was writing things I wasn't supposed to be writing at 10, 11, 12 years old, because I read romance comic books.
Oh, I
And
know
so
the comic books you talking about.
so somebody was always kissing somebody at the end, and I look at them now and I'm like, you need a whipping. 11-year-old Crystal, you need a whipping. I mean, didn't have sex in them, but somebody was always getting kissed or kissing somebody.
Like just that soap opera level of intimacy. When they right before they would cut away to the Palmolive commercial. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I spent some time as well not knowing how grown I was. I'll put it like that. Now, I want to go back. Somebody said, as a fan cast, and I just kind of want to get your opinion on it. Somebody said Jill Scott for Francine.
Yes, that too.
That too?
I like, yes. Yeah. I'll take Jill Scott. She
Jill
would
Scott
be good.
Okay.
I just love Lizzo so much. She needs to do something. But I would definitely take a Jill Scott. I see better Jill Scott working that part. Can you see? I can see Jill Scott smacking the heck.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I feel like I have seen Jill Scott smack somebody. I don't know when, but I just feel like she has. I feel like I've seen that in my life.
Yeah.
And we've seen her acting chops. So I feel like she's definitely got the gravity and the sort of quiet sensual. I remember how she the quiet part of it in why did I get not why did I get married? Was it why did I get married? Yeah. And she was the quiet, put upon, shy wife, kind of, creeping up the mountain, chasing after all the other people. I think it was that, whatever that film was, it was a Tyler Perry situation. And I see that same energy there. Um, I wanted to make sure that I caught the other comments. Kamisha asks, have you ever had a character whose story you didn't want to tell, but they wouldn't leave you alone?
Yes. That happens a lot when I'm writing short stories. I go back to the Baldwin quote again, that you don't get the story you want, you get the story you get. And then sometimes it doesn't go in the direction that you wanted. And I think you have to, once you have that story, then you have to figure out how you can make it the best that it needs to be in the way that you got it. I don't think wrestling it back to your original idea is always the best idea.
Mm,
And I think that's when some of my best writing occurs, when I allow the story to wander away, even though it's usually frightening. It's usually wandering away from something that I felt safer
yeah,
with, and it'll wander to a place where I'm like, I don't know. Like in the Birds of Opulence, it took many revisions. I pride myself on being a good mama. So when Lucy drops that baby in front of all those people, uh, and acts like she doesn't even care, I was like, oh my gosh, that can't happen. And I kept
right.
erasing it, and it's like, let's not do that. I kept coming back to it, but um, it's what served her truth. And so I finally said, okay, it's going to hurt me, but I guess she has to drop the baby. And she doesn't like drop the baby. She's holding the baby when she's in a rocking chair, and she just kind of lets it slide off her lap.
Slide down. Okay. Now, see, I know that I should be a lot more appalled and aggrieved at hearing that, but just point of reference, my mama grew up at Green Street Baptist Church, and my first experience of the Holy Ghost was as an infant when she threw me.
Oh
She
wow.
she experienced the Holy Ghost. I'm taught that we're not supposed to say caught the Holy Ghost, but she experienced the Holy Ghost, and in that process, somehow threw me. And a deacon in the front row, I think she was in the third row, a deacon in the front row caught me, and I feel like that's why I kind of shy away from a little bit too much of the. I don't like to get too spirit filled or be in too many tent revivals even now. So while I understand that it is shocking and galling for most, I'm like, yeah, until you've been thrown by a football in the name of Jesus, you can miss me with that. Um, as we're drawing to a close, I want to make sure that I'm not missing any other questions. I see a comment here again from Kiwana Rose of Rose Bloom Management. As I've gotten older, I find that my work gives me a better sense of who I've become or who I once was. Does that happen for you at all? Has your own sense of self-identity evolved from book to book?
Yes, I mean, I think each book teaches me um, who I am as a woman and who I am as a writer. I think the Birds of Opulence gave me a much more straighter spine, and it was the first time that, like I said, I stopped being the poet over here, the essayist over here, the fiction writer over here, and I became just Crystal writing, um, and embraced that. So that's definitely true.
I'm sorry, Judy. I had to put Judy Lee's comment up there. Country children are always falling on or off something. I'm as I listen to
It's
you,
true.
what you just said. There seems to be a theme of duality or multiple versions of characters and persons in your stories. The day and night was mentioned, and even Francine talking about her experience as a child. And she said that she broke herself into two Francines.
Mm-hmm.
There was the proud young woman who was taking care of herself and running the household, and then there was this other Francine that was curled up inside of her as a child, longing for the touch of a rubber hand of a baby doll. This seems to be, I think that appeals to me because I'm a Gemini, and I like the idea of being able to wholly embrace different versions of you as individuals. People who
Mm-hmm.
listen to me in conversation will hear me say often, and so other me said da 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 da, and I don't have a problem with it. What is it that informs that theme throughout your work, this theme of multiple identities within a person?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an a curiosity that I've always sort of wrestled with. A curiosity about the psychology of people, like why they do the things they do, and are they the same person all the time, and not so much. I mean, I'm interested in real life, in real people too, so I'm really nosy, but particularly with with my fictional characters, I'm always interested. I always say that I'm sort of obsessed with the woman in town who has a reputation, not so much what she does, but why. Like
Mm.
why did she get not just a judgment on her, but other people around her too, like why. And so I'm sort of led by that question, like why. One story, I don't think I'll ever write it, but I like comparing my curiosity to remember the diaper wearing astronaut.
Yes, Lord help, who drove across country over some man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some like Florida to Texas or somewhere. I don't even remember where, but she had all of this together and she had children. So I'm thinking, often I think about her as a person, but I also think about her as a character and what would be the cutoff for someone in my life. I think, well, if I was doing that um, at her age and she had children at home and a husband at home, I'd probably say, okay, I might get to Louisville. I might get an hour out and I'd be like, I got to pick up the kids, or uh, I left a pot of beans on the stove. It's wasting too much gas.
Shoot, especially yeah, because that happened in was that no, we had Obama by the time that happened, so gas prices weren't horrible. It wasn't Bush era gas prices, but
Right.
they were still kind of rough. That was definitely kind of
But that is and the other side of that is some kind of, maybe it's a psychosis, but it's definitely dedication. She put the astronaut grade diaper on and said,
right.
okay, here I go.
Like that was completely considered. It was like, I'm not stopping. I'm going, like, yeah. The forethought that went into it, you really can't say that was crazy. That was thought out. That was
Yeah.
planned. We might not understand what informed that plan, but that was well planned. I want to make sure there was one last comment, and then
Okay.
let's see, hold on. This is the one. This was from Angel Monique, who asked, does your writing occur one book at a time, or do you find yourself writing pieces of several at once?
Yeah. Thank you, Angel, for that question. That speaks to my, I think probably what my agent sees as a problem, what my editors see as a problem. But I don't believe in writer's block. So if I get stuck on one project, I just move on to the next one, and I'm constantly rotating them all. So I think I see that as a problem, but I can't stop doing it. Um, yeah, or I'll stop in the middle of writing a book and write an essay or write some poems or write a short story when I have novel deadlines. So, yep, do
When
that all
I
the time.
when I tell you you are speaking to hearts out here tonight, like we normally do a segment called the after story when we're done with the show. I expect it's going to be a full room of a bunch of people just exhaling, just okay. Thank you again so very much for your generosity of time, of spirit, of sharing your upcoming work with us. Again, I want to remind people that in August 3rd, you should be able to go to your local bookstore and find a copy of Perfect Black. This is the cover right here, with a foreword by Nikki Finney and illustrations by Ronald W. Davis, and of course, the beautiful and potent and powerful works of Crystal Wilkinson. Again, Sister Crystal, thank you so much for coming. We
Thank
had church
you.
with you tonight. You brought a good word. And you know what? We do a thing here. Now, if you don't want to do it, I understand, but we do a thing here called Tipping the Griot, and we like to put up folks' Cash App. Can people bless you with a little something if while they waiting on being able to buy your book? Would you let them do that?
Sure, but I don't even know what my Cash App is. I have to figure out what it is.
Fair enough. Well, we can put it up. We can put it up in a post later. And
Okay.
I just want to let you know, not that you.
Oh, wait. I don't know my Cash App, but people can pre-order Perfect Black.
Okay, where can they do that?
Probably their local bookstore, but or bookshop.org if you search for Perfect Black at bookshop.org.
Okay, and go ahead.
That'll get a store, an independent bookstore close to you.
Perfect. We do typically send out links to bookshop.org, so we will make a point to do that. Matter of fact, I bet one of my mods is on that right now. I just want to say again, thank you. We had a wonderful night tonight, and this has made coming full circle for the full year absolutely better than I could have possibly imagined. And I want to extend right now just an open invitation. If you ever want to come back on the program, please do. If you'd like to come back after Perfect Black has been published and we've got a copy in hand, we would love to have you. I would love to be able to share that work with our audience again. Crystal Wilkinson, thank you so much for being our anniversary guest tonight, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you. All right, y'all. This has been a fantastic night here at Storytime with Julian. I do want to remind you all, just to make sure that we're closing up everything. The book that you heard from tonight was The Birds of Opulence. That's available now. And of course, you will be able to pick up Perfect Black. And we're going to post a link. If we don't have it up before I finish these words, we're going to make sure. Hold up. Is it? I'm looking to see. Nope, we didn't have it just yet. But if we don't have it up before I finish these words, we will post up a link on the page later on this week, so that we'll have a link for you by Thursday for sure. This is that's it. I'm over here just like I'm kind of full right now. This has been Storytime with Julian. I am your host and lead griot, Julian Long. We had Crystal Wilkinson with us here tonight. There is going to be an after story, so for those of you who are in the after story group, just hang tight. We'll open up a room in about 5 minutes, and that's it, y'all. Peace.